Portability of religious messages has been key for religious movements throughout the centuries. Religion, as you know, is going through challenging times in Ireland, and an American Church of Ireland evangelist, Greg Fromholz, who's been native in Ireland for the last 20 years, is delivering the message 21st century style in the first of its kind. It's an app which I have in front of me on an iPad too, but will be available in a week for smartphones.
That's correct, yeah. On the iPhone within a week, and then onto the Android systems within a few weeks after that.
Within a few weeks after that. And so the tablet of stone is being replaced by the digital tablet.
Absolutely. Moses would have been delighted if he could have come down the mountain with these babies.
How did this come about?
Well, I've written a book called Liberate Eden, and we were looking to publishers to come and publish this book and say, how do we, take this book beyond being a book? And a lot of the publishers were saying things like, it's too different to be Christian. It's too much artwork, too much video-based. It's looking to be too interactive. And so I was approached by a couple of colleagues of mine who actually I would consider my digital authors, Joy Von Medding and John Ryan, and they said to me, you know what, let's do something different. Let's do it on an iPad. Why is it that I find myself stuck in a quagmire of disbelief?
Okay. I'm playing this directly off the iPad into the microphone.
With soul comes love, and with love comes freedom. With love comes pain, and with true love comes the option to sabotage ourselves. Indeed. And so you have like video interactions throughout the text.
Okay, I've just paused it there. So that was you, and the image on the screen shows you with a blindfold, and you're talking away there. But it's a very arresting image. So for this digital generation, they're going to look at this and find it very familiar.
Yes.
And interacting with it in a very familiar way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. My kids will pick up the iPad and walk through it like it's something they've seen before. They had all of their lives. But I think the book itself, it's trying to go beyond words into an experience. And I think that the iPad, or at least these smartphones or the technology we're at right now, really lends itself to experiencing the words beyond the words as such.
You could imagine that someone who waiting for a bus or whatever, or even traveling on a bus or a train, instead of playing solitaire on their phone, might just go into this app and be somewhat inspired. But let's go back. You've been here for 20 years.
Yes.
How did you become an evangelist? Where were you born? How did all this happen?
Well, I grew up in Michigan, United States, and 21 years ago I came to Ireland. And interestingly, a very quick story is the reason why I do what I do is I was 15 years old. I was working in Mexico. And just there on a short-term kind of missions trip. Our job was to play with children and hang out with them, teach them a bit of a culture of play.
This while you were still in high school?
Yeah, 15 years old, so it was like a summer thing.
Yeah.
And what I did is we were standing on the streets, and a young girl approached me, age 13, and through the translator solicited me for prostitution. To say the least, as a 15-year-old, this just shook my world into pieces. I'd never been in a third world or developing nation before. I'd never met a prostitute, let alone a child before. And I asked her through the translator why. She explained to me that they had no food and no water. And in order to get clean water and to pay for food, that her and her sisters, because the father had left, had to sell themselves. So was I interested? And of course I said no. But I said to her, but surely there's hope, because I believe in God and I believe there's a hope beyond ourselves. So I thought this would be the answer. I said, but surely there's hope, through the translator. And she looked back at me and she said literally 4 words that, I'll never forget. She said, there is no hope. And from that moment on in my life, I just decided that I could not rest another day without teenagers or university students knowing that there's hope beyond themselves, that when recession hits and when the families break up and when we're bullied, that there is something beyond ourselves. And so I really have endeavored to spend my life doing just that, telling students this. Now, you could be doing that in Mexico or in Africa or whatever. You're doing it from Ireland. That's right. Tell me how you ended up here. Well, Ireland's really messed up. No, no, I came over to Ireland on just a 1-week trip, and I was asked to come back and work in secondary schools to take kind of this message, a bit more creative, artistic message into schools. There are opportunities because of the way that the church and the state work together here, or used to work together in the early 90s, where we used to be able to go into schools and hang out with hundreds and thousands, literally, of secondary students and just discuss, break down, tear apart, deconstruct faith. And that's why I came back to Ireland, because I saw an opportunity to work alongside traditions that have so much good going for them, but also to help those who are involved in traditions to actually see that there's a personal element to what their faith is as well.
How did this thing happen, this this application, which, as I say, will be across all smart media very shortly? I mean, who sponsors it? Is there a church behind it?
No, there actually isn't a church behind it. Though I do work for the Church of Ireland. I work for an organization called Three Rock Youth, and I do go to a Church of Ireland, Holy Trinity in Rathmines. But this app came out of a collection of artists who said, let's do something together. We fund this ourselves. We work, from 10 p.m. till 4 a.m. on this app. It is being published by a new company out of London called Matthews and Owen, and they're actually doing all the PR backing for it. But it's all of us risking a lot just to see if we can do something new.
Now, what does the Church of Ireland think of this kind of thing? I mean, do they give it their imprimatur?
Well, interesting enough, Archbishop John Neal, who I know you're a friend of, did actually give it his imprimatur. He said it encouraged and challenged him. He also asked me to bark more at the fringes. Now we have a new archbishop, and I look forward to seeing his view on it. But I do believe that the traditions right now are in a situation where they're flatlining. And I think we need to do something about that.
Yeah, I mean, people seem to have a thirst for some sort of other dimension to their lives, but the regular churches do not appeal as they once did.
No.
So how do you change that? Or do you have to change them? I mean, your message here is coming in a very 21st century form. I mean, is it that the kind of sterility which you often find in church services has just got to change? I
think it does. I think there needs to be more community, more interaction, more discussion, more disagreement, more option to fail. I was working in secondary school a little while ago, and a young man came up to me after we did all the visuals and the videos and all the interaction. We had so much fun. We thought we'd really sold the message of Jesus well. We did this. We're awesome. And this young man came up to me and just said, you know what? Jesus failed. I was like, excuse me? He's like, Jesus failed. And I'm like, hold on a second. You want to defend God. God didn't need defense in this situation. And I just asked him, well, why did you say that? And he said, well, where was this church or this God when my father left me? Where was this church or this God in school when I feel left out and alone? Where is he now? And I realized in that moment that we're no longer accessible anymore as a church. We try to be accessible, and there are some great churches out there, don't get me wrong. There's a real lunge and a hope for something more in churches. But it seems like we've kind of put a velvet rope up and saying...
But there are very fundamental questions in what that young man said. The question is, can prayer change things?
And I believe it can.
Because on the one hand, you have all these theological arguments about free will.
Yes.
So if your father leaves the home, if he becomes an alcoholic, he's doing this by his free will. Can you pray to get him to stop? Well, you can pray, but will it stop him? Maybe not. Yeah. So what is the role of church and religion in that situation? Is it simply to offer comfort to those who are afflicted?
I think there's a both and. I think yes is the big answer. I think prayer is a recognition of reality. It helps us get perspective on what's going on. My father did leave me. My father was an alcoholic, so I have very personal experience of both of these things. And I did pray an awful lot as a child that these things would not happen, that I wouldn't come from a broken family. In those moments, I found peace outside of myself that I could not define now except for being God.
I mean, to take it in a superficial way, when Meath and Louth play,
yes,
right, and there was a very contentious match last year, and both teams might be made up of very religious people.
Praying their hearts out, yes.
Now, the notion that God will say, well, which of them would do best out of me intervening in this match?
Yes.
I mean, would it be justice to be done if Louth won, or would the character formation element of their defeat last year, was that a price worth paying for being deprived of a goal? But people do pray for things like that.
They do. And I don't think we can stop ourselves from praying for things. I think we want to hope in something better for ourselves. And I get what you're saying, Pat, but what I'm more interested in, what do we do? What are we actually doing? Instead of just praying or sitting in our cold little cages, talking about God, what are we actually going to break out of these things and do something in society? When are we actually going to reach out to those who need God most? So I'm not saying that prayer is a vital thing and important, but I also think it's a recognition of reality that drives us to serve.
Now, you are described as an evangelical Christian, isn't that so?
Depending on what evangelical means these days.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yes,
because we have this idea of evangelical pastors burning the Quran and offensive stuff like that, or being extremely right-wing.
Yes.
How do you define your evangelism?
Well, interestingly enough, like I said there, what is evangelical? Are we post-evangelical? Are we post-Christian? Are we post-tradition? What are we even now? And, I mean, The other day, on Sunday in church at Holy Trinity in Rathmines, I actually had a glass frame. We wrote on it the ways that we're defining ourselves as a church, as a people. I then took a rock and smashed it. And I didn't go as far. I didn't leave it there with the glass on the floor. I actually took a frame and I broke it. I wrestled with it and I smashed it to the ground. I'm tired of these boxes that these prescribed cages that we're put in to say, you are evangelical, you are Catholic, you are Protestant. God loves you because of this, because you did this, God loves you. To me, that's just all rubbish. God loves every single one of us right here, right now, where we're at. And I think that our biggest crime is that we continue to put people in these boxes and on these shelves until they have to act one way and do another. God is an all-welcome kind of guy, you know?
Okay, in conclusion then,
yes,
this
sir.
app, which can be found, Liberate Eden, that's what it's called.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay, and it's available now from the iTunes App Store for iPad and will be for iPhone and then a few weeks later for Android. $5.49.
That's
One
correct.
reason it's good value then compared to the book that would have to be published of the same quality,
yes,
and with the same messages.
Yes.
So how is it going to be used? How will someone use this app?
Well, they'll download it to their smartphone or to their iPhone or their iPad, and they'll basically just be able to read it like a normal book, but also interact with the videos. There'll be a bit of social networking built into it as well. And not only that, the great thing about these, the way the apps are being developed from Al Gore to Bjork, is that, we can update these things. So, for example, an artist called Foy Vance, we're shooting a video with him tomorrow, which will be an exclusive video for this app. So you after owning this thing for a month, you might get something new into it.
And given the social networking element of it, you might find a lot of new friends.
Well, I hope so.
Who think the same way.
Or at least who are open to the discussion. We need to start talking about this stuff. Why isn't it working and how can it work better?
All right. Well, the app, once again, is called Liberate Eden.
Yes.
And it will be available for all media very shortly, but currently now, at this moment, for iPad.
And it's available on iTunes, yeah.
On iTunes. And Greg Fromholz, thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning.
It was a pleasure. You seem to be very receptive to it, and hopefully people get the idea of what it is. But more than that, hopefully people will get the idea of how it can affect change, I guess. So yeah, it was very, very well. I was nervous though. But that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, it seemed more like a conversation than I thought. I thought it was going to be much more of an interview. That was more like a conversation, which I thought was good. So let's see where this goes, right?